A humble maid who had worked for years serving a powerful billionaire family was suddenly accused of stealing a priceless sapphire necklace. She was dragged into court without a lawyer, humiliated in front of cameras, and left completely alone against the influence of the rich. Everyone believed she was guilty because the word of the wealthy carried more weight than her tears and her truth. Reporters called her a thief. Strangers whispered her name like it was a warning. But in the middle of the trial, when it seemed that nothing could save her, something happened that no one expected. The billionaire's own young son, the same boy she had raised like her own child, broke free from his nanny, ran into the courtroom, and shouted the words that changed everything. That moment turned the entire case upside down, revealing a secret that even the most powerful in the room couldn't hide. Before we continue with this story, dear viewers, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. The courtroom went silent. Grace Miller stood trembling near the witness stand, her hands cuffed together, eyes red from nights without sleep. The noise of reporters outside the door faded until all she could hear was her own breath, slow, shaky, frightened. Across the room, Linda Collins, the billionaire's mother, pointed at her and shouted, "She stole from us!" Her voice echoed off the marble walls. The crowd turned their eyes to Grace, like she was some kind of criminal on display. And just when everyone seemed to believe her, a small voice broke through the tension. "Grandma, stop lying." The sound froze everyone in the room. Heads turned toward the back where Ryan Collins, a small boy with messy brown hair, stood beside his frightened nanny. His little chest rose and fell quickly, but his eyes didn't move away from his grandmother. The judge banged his gavel, asking for order, but the silence that followed was heavier than any noise. Grace's body went weak. She didn't know whether to cry or run. For a second, she thought she was dreaming. The boy she loved like her own had just done the unthinkable. He had spoken against his own family. But before anyone could speak again, the judge ordered a short recess. Officers escorted Ryan out, and the moment passed like a storm, leaving behind cold air. Grace stood still, her heart aching, trying to understand how her life had come to this point. It hadn't always been this way. For nearly 8 years, Grace worked in the Collins estate, a beautiful mansion on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Every morning, she arrived before sunrise, polished the floors, and prepared breakfast before the family even woke up. She was quiet, respectful, and loyal. She cared for David Collins, the billionaire owner of the estate, his mother Linda, and especially little Ryan, the boy who had lost his mother when he was just a baby. Grace filled that empty space without trying. She read him bedtime stories, packed his lunch for school, and taught him how to pray before bed. To Ryan, Grace wasn't the maid, she was family. But to Linda, Grace was always just the help. Linda never liked how close Grace and Ryan had become. She would give her short looks during dinner, correct her tone when she spoke, and remind her that this house wasn't her home. Grace tried to stay out of her way. She had no money, no powerful name, only her honesty. Then, one cold winter morning, the house changed forever. The sapphire heart necklace, a priceless family heirloom that had been passed down for generations, disappeared from Linda's private study. Panic filled the halls. The police were called. No one left the property until every corner was searched. And within hours, Linda pointed straight at Grace. "She's the only one who cleaned my office yesterday," she said sharply. "Who else could it be?" Grace froze. Her voice trembled as she tried to explain that she would never steal anything. But David didn't say a word. He stood behind his mother, his face expressionless, eyes full of conflict. When the officers arrived, they searched Grace's small locker, her bag, even her coat. They found nothing. Still, they took her to the 24th precinct, where she was questioned for hours. Cameras caught the moment she walked out in handcuffs, and by the next day, her name was on every news site. Maid steals from Manhattan billionaire family. She returned home to her small apartment in Brooklyn that night, humiliated. Neighbors avoided her. Some whispered, others just stared. Grace sat by her window all night, crying quietly. She wasn't crying because of the lost job or the police. She was crying because Ryan would think she was a thief. When the court summons arrived 2 weeks later, Grace didn't even have money for a lawyer. She went alone, wearing the only clean dress she had, the one she used for Sunday church. She looked around the courtroom that morning and saw Linda sitting with her expensive attorney, Robert Harris, and David quietly behind them, unable to meet her eyes. Grace stood on her side with no one. The judge entered, cameras flashed, the trial began. Robert spoke like he was already certain of her guilt. He called her an opportunist who had taken advantage of the family's trust. His words cut deep, and the people in the room nodded like they knew her story before hearing it. Grace kept quiet. She didn't interrupt. She didn't cry. She just stared at the table in front of her and whispered a prayer under her breath. When it was finally her turn to speak, her voice was small but steady. "I didn't steal anything," she said softly. "I took care of that family like they were my own. I loved that child. I would rather lose my life than take something that isn't mine." No one clapped. No one spoke. Her words fell into silence. Outside, the news reporters were already writing headlines about her guilt, but inside, Grace stood tall, even when the world looked away. She looked across the room one last time, her eyes meeting David's for a moment. He looked down quickly, ashamed. And in that moment, Grace realized she was truly alone. "Still," she whispered again, almost to herself, "the truth will speak one day." Little did she know, the truth was already walking toward her in the small shoes of a boy she once tucked into bed. The sound of the gavel still echoed in Grace's mind as she walked out of the courthouse that day. The cold wind hit her face, but she didn't feel it. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and strangers pointed their phones at her. She kept her head down and walked through the crowd in silence. The words she had spoken in court, "I didn't steal anything," were still ringing in her ears, but nobody seemed to care. To them, the story was already decided. That night, she sat alone in her tiny apartment in Maplewood, Brooklyn. The place was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic outside. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep. The newspaper on the table showed her picture beside a headline that read, "Billionaire Family Betrayed by Maid." She turned the paper face down. For years she had served the Collins family with all her heart. Every corner of that mansion still carried her touch. She remembered Ryan's laughter, his small footsteps on the stairs, the way he called her Mommy Grace. The thought broke her. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered to herself, "How could they think I'd do that?" Days turned into weeks, and Grace's name spread like wildfire. In the streets, people looked at her differently. Some pitied her, others avoided her. The grocery clerk who used to greet her with a smile now counted her change without looking up. She tried to find another cleaning job, but every door she knocked on closed as soon as they recognized her. Her rent was late, her savings almost gone. Still, she refused to give up. Each morning, she dressed neatly and walked around the city, handing out resumes, hoping someone would listen, but it was like no one wanted to be near her. By evening, she'd return home exhausted and collapse on her small couch, staring at the ceiling until dawn. And then one afternoon, there was a knock on her door. She hesitated before opening it, expecting maybe a landlord or a reporter. But standing there was someone different, a young woman in her late 20s, holding a brown folder to her chest. Her expression was kind, her voice calm. "Miss Miller?" she asked softly. "My name is Anna Parker. I'm a lawyer from the Brooklyn Community Legal Center. I read about your case in the paper, and I believe you've been treated unfairly." Grace blinked, confused. "A lawyer? I can't pay anyone," she said quickly. Anna smiled gently. "You don't have to. I'm offering to help for free." For the first time in weeks, Grace felt something stir inside her, a small spark of hope. She invited Anna in, embarrassed by her tiny apartment, but too tired to care. The two women sat at the kitchen table, and Anna opened her folder. "I've gone through the reports," Anna said. "Something doesn't add up. The police mentioned that the mansion's security camera in the study was off the night the necklace went missing. That seems strange to me. Was it ever off before?" Grace shook her head. "Never. Mr. Collins had cameras on every floor. He said they were for safety. I don't understand how it was off." Anna took notes quickly. "Did anyone else have access to that room?" Grace hesitated. "Only Mrs. Collins. She was very private about that room. I only cleaned it when she allowed me to." Anna looked up. "Then we'll start there." Grace didn't know whether to believe her. So many people had made promises before promises that disappeared as soon as things got hard. But there was something about Anna's voice, steady and honest, that made her want to trust again. As they talked, Grace told her everything: how she was accused, how David stayed silent, how Ryan's eyes filled with fear the day she was taken away. Anna listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging. When they finished, Anna closed her folder and said firmly, "We're going to fight this. You don't deserve what they did to you." Grace felt her throat tighten. "No one has said that to me since this started," she whispered. Anna smiled. "Then it's time someone did." That night, Grace lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, but it was different this time. The sadness was still there, but it was mixed with something new: determination. She didn't know how the fight would end, but at least she wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Anna called her early. "I want to visit the Collins estate," she said. "Maybe there's something there that everyone missed." Grace hesitated. "Mrs. Collins won't let you in." "I don't need her permission," Anna replied. "There's always a way to find the truth." Grace didn't understand how, but she agreed to meet her at a cafe near Riverside Drive, just 2 blocks from the mansion. She wore her plain gray coat and sat nervously by the window. When Anna arrived, she had a confident look in her eyes. "We'll start by talking to the staff," she said. "Sometimes the truth hides in whispers." They walked near the mansion gates but didn't go inside. Grace stared at the tall building that once felt like home. She could almost hear Ryan's voice calling her name. Anna noticed the pain on her face and said quietly, "We'll clear your name, Grace. I promise." Back inside the mansion, Linda Collins was pacing in her study. She had already heard about the new lawyer helping Grace. Her grip tightened on the edge of her desk. "She's still trying to fight?" she muttered. Her lawyer, Robert Harris, looked uneasy. "It might not go far, Mrs. Collins. The evidence is still in your favor." Linda turned sharply. "I don't care. I want her silenced. Do you understand?" Robert nodded, though his eyes showed doubt. He had worked for powerful people before, but something about this case felt wrong. As he left, Linda opened her jewelry box. Inside was the sapphire heart necklace, still shining, hidden under layers of silk. She stared at it for a long time before closing the lid. Outside, Grace and Anna walked away from the gates, unaware that the truth they were searching for was only a few walls away inside that polished walnut box that could destroy a family and set an innocent woman free. In the Riesen Romer, their friend and ever. The days that followed were long and heavy for Grace. Each morning she woke up before sunrise, brewed a small cup of coffee, and stared out her window at the city that had turned its back on her. Yet, for the first time in months, she had something to hold on to: hope. Anna Parker visited her almost every day. She asked questions, made phone calls, and spent hours reviewing every paper from the case. Grace watched her work quietly, grateful but also afraid. People who tried to help her before had always stopped halfway, afraid of the Collins family's power. But Anna was different. She didn't seem scared of anyone. One afternoon, they met again at the Brooklyn Legal Center. The office was small and simple, papers stacked on desks, the smell of coffee in the air. Anna placed a folder in front of Grace. "Something's not right about the night that necklace went missing," she said. "The security report says the camera in Mrs. Collins's study was off for maintenance. But I called the company. They said they were never asked to service it." Grace frowned. "Then who turned it off?" "That's what we need to find out," Anna said. She leaned back in her chair, thinking. "Grace, do you remember anyone else in that part of the house that night?" Grace hesitated. "I remember hearing footsteps in the hallway around midnight. I thought it was Mrs. Collins, but I'm not sure. The lights were dim." Anna nodded. "That helps more than you think." While Anna kept digging, things inside the Collins estate were beginning to change. David Collins sat alone in his office late at night, the city lights reflecting off the window behind him. He hadn't been sleeping. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Grace's face in court, the way she looked at him when he refused to speak for her. He opened his laptop and watched old recordings from the mansion's cameras, hoping to distract himself. He clicked through videos of dinners, birthdays, even quiet mornings. Then he found one file labeled Ryan's Room, 2018. The screen flickered, and there she was, Grace, sitting on the edge of Ryan's bed, reading him a story. The boy was crying softly, missing his mother. Grace stroked his hair and whispered, "You're safe, baby. You're loved." David paused the video. For the first time in months, his eyes softened. He realized how much she had done for his family, things no paycheck could buy. He closed the laptop and whispered to himself, maybe she really didn't do it. But across the hall, his mother was wide awake. Linda Collins stood by her window, clutching her silk robe tightly. She had overheard one of the maids mention a young lawyer asking questions in the neighborhood. That meant trouble. She picked up her phone and called Robert Harris, her lawyer. "We need to end this," she said coldly. "I don't want that woman or her lawyer anywhere near this family again." Robert sighed. "Mrs. Collins, if you push too hard, people might start asking questions. Maybe it's time to—" "Do not tell me what time it is," Linda interrupted sharply. "Just handle it." The next morning, Anna took a bus across Manhattan and stood in front of the tall black gates of the Collins estate. She didn't plan to go inside. She only wanted to observe. But as she watched, she noticed one of the younger maids leaving for her break. Anna approached her gently. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm a lawyer working on Grace Miller's case. I don't mean any trouble. But can I ask you something?" The maid looked frightened. "Mrs. Collins doesn't want us to talk about that," she whispered. "I understand," Anna replied softly. "But Grace's life is falling apart. If you know anything, even a small thing, you could help her." The young woman looked around nervously, then whispered, "I saw Mrs. Collins in the study late that night, the same night the necklace disappeared." Anna's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" The maid nodded quickly. "Yes, she told me to go to bed and not mention it to anyone. Please, don't tell her I said this." "I won't," Anna promised. She thanked the girl and left quietly, her heart beating fast. She now had something solid, not foolproof, but a crack in the wall of lies. That evening, Anna visited Grace again and told her everything. Grace listened, her eyes filling with tears. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it wasn't just bad luck. She wanted to ruin me." Anna reached across the table and held her hand. "We're getting closer. But we need something stronger, something the court can't ignore. Grace nodded slowly. What if Ryan remembers something? He was awake that night. I heard him walking to get water. Anna leaned forward. That's worth trying. Maybe he saw something. Grace hesitated. But how can we reach him? His grandmother won't let me near him. Anna smiled faintly. Leave that to me. Inside the mansion, little Ryan Collins sat on his bed, playing with a small toy truck, but his thoughts were far from his toys. He missed Grace. Every night he looked at the drawing he had made, the one showing her holding his hand, and whispered, "I miss you, Mommy Grace." That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept remembering the night everyone was shouting about the missing necklace. He had woken up thirsty and gone to the hallway. The light under his grandmother's study door had been on. He peeked through the crack and saw her kneeling beside the open jewelry box, whispering something he couldn't hear. She looked scared, not angry. He remembered her saying, "This will teach her where she belongs." At the time, he didn't understand. But now, thinking about Grace and all the shouting at court, the memory scared him. He pulled the blanket up to his chest and whispered, "I have to tell Dad." Down the hall, David sat in his office again, unaware that the truth he had ignored for so long was about to come from the smallest voice in his home, the one that still believed in love and fairness, even when the adults did not. The morning of the final hearing came cold and cloudy. A gray mist covered downtown Manhattan, as if the whole city was holding its breath. Grace Miller walked toward the courthouse with slow steps. She wore her old work uniform, the same one she had on the day she was arrested. It wasn't pride, it was remembrance. Beside her, Anna Parker held a folder filled with notes and statements. She had spent the whole night reviewing everything. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was sharp. "Today," she said softly, "we let the truth speak." Grace nodded, her voice shaking. "Even if no one listens, at least I'll know I didn't stay silent." Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Reporters filled the back rows. Cameras waited. On one side sat Linda Collins, dressed in her expensive black suit, her chin lifted high, as if she still owned the room. Her lawyer, Robert Harris, whispered nervously beside her. Behind them sat David Collins, his face pale, his hands clasped together. He hadn't slept all night either. His mind kept replaying his son's words, the quiet confession Ryan had made the night before. It had happened late the previous evening. Ryan had crept into his father's office holding his old drawing. "Dad," he whispered, "I saw Grandma that night. She was in the study. She had the necklace." David had stared at him, speechless. "Ryan, are you sure?" "Yes," the boy said, his small voice trembling. "She told me not to say anything. But she lied, Dad. She lied about everything." David felt his stomach twist. The truth hit him like a wave. All this time, the person he trusted most had caused all this pain. He held Ryan close and said quietly, "You did the right thing, son." Now, that memory sat heavy in his chest as he watched the doors of the courtroom open and saw his son enter with the court officer holding his hand. The judge took her seat. The crowd went silent. Anna rose to her feet. "Your Honor, before we begin, there's a witness who has requested to speak." The judge frowned. "A witness? This late?" "Yes, Your Honor," Anna said firmly. "The truth comes when it's ready, not when it's convenient." The judge gave a slow nod. "Very well, proceed." Ryan stepped forward nervously. He looked so small among the grown-ups, but his eyes were steady. The bailiff helped him climb onto the small witness platform. "State your name," the judge said gently. "Ryan Collins," he whispered. "And what would you like to tell the court, Ryan?" The boy looked toward his father, then at Grace. Tears filled his eyes. "That she didn't steal anything. I saw what happened." The room fell silent. Reporters stopped typing. Even Linda froze in her seat. Ryan took a deep breath and spoke slowly. That night, I woke up to get water. Grandma's light was on. I saw her holding the necklace and putting it inside a little wooden box in her desk. She told me not to say anything. She said people would blame me if I did. The judge leaned forward. "Are you sure about what you saw, son?" Ryan nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She said, "This will teach her where she belongs." Those were her words. The silence that followed was deafening. Anna turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, we request immediate permission to search Mrs. Collins's office for that wooden box." Linda's face went pale. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "He's just a child. He doesn't understand what he saw." But David stood suddenly. His voice broke through the tension. "Stop, Mother, please." He turned to the judge. "I've already looked. The box is there. The necklace is inside. I brought it." A collective gasp filled the room. David held up a small sealed evidence bag containing the missing sapphire necklace. Its blue stone glimmered under the courtroom lights. Linda's lips parted, but no words came. The judge's tone turned firm. "Mrs. Collins, do you deny this item was found in your office?" Linda looked down, her composure cracking. I only wanted to protect my family's name," she whispered. "By destroying someone else's," Anna said quietly. No one spoke. The truth hung heavy in the air. The judge finally spoke. "After reviewing this new evidence and testimony, this court finds Grace Miller not guilty on all charges." The room erupted gasps, murmurs, and the sound of reporters rushing for their phones. Grace's knees buckled, and Anna caught her before she fell. Tears streamed down her face. David walked toward her slowly, guilt written all over him. "Grace," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I should have believed you." Grace looked at him for a long time. "You should have," she said quietly, "but your son did." Ryan ran up and hugged her tightly. "I told them, Mommy Grace. I told them the truth." She knelt and held him close, crying openly now. "Thank you, baby. You saved me." Reporters took photos, but for once, Grace didn't care. This moment wasn't for the cameras, it was for her soul. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. The same crowd that once whispered her name in shame now watched in silence as she walked free. Anna stood beside her, smiling softly. "You did it," Anna said. Grace shook her head. "No, we did it. You, Ryan, even his father, the truth did it." Across the street, David stood watching them with Ryan in his arms. For the first time in years, he looked at peace. Inside, Linda Collins sat alone, surrounded by silence and consequences. The woman who had once ruled her family with fear now faced the same justice she had tried to deny others. That evening, Grace returned to her apartment. The city lights shimmered outside her window, but for once, the noise didn't scare her. She sat by the window holding the drawing Ryan had made months ago, the one of him holding her hand. She smiled through her tears. Life had broken her once, but truth had put her back together. She closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm free." And this time, the world finally believed her. Dear viewers, what a story! A woman who had nothing, no lawyer, no power, no voice, stood alone against a world that judged her before hearing her truth. But in the end, it wasn't money or influence that saved her. It was love, courage, and a child's honesty. This story reminds us that even when life seems unfair, truth has its own timing. It may come late, but it never fails to arrive. If this story touched your heart, please don't leave without showing some love. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Like this video if you believe that justice still matters. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotional real-life stories like this one. Because every tear, every struggle, and every small act of truth deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in what's right.